Right, I'm going to be going live now. Is that okay? Right. I'm going live now on my.
Yeah,
okay, no, that's fine. Thanks. Is the print finished?
It is never showing.
Right. Okay. All right. Cool. No worries. Thank you. Just conscious of background noise. That's all. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the first webinar of 2021. Can't quite believe we're actually saying that. 2020 seemed like the longest and strangest year ever, but here we are at the start of a brand new year. I've actually stopped saying Happy New Year now. I don't know about anyone else, but I've made a point of stopping that because I think we're on the 21st now, so it's about time. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. I'm just about to get going and I'm going to just share my screen so hopefully everybody can see that. Excuse me. So today is very much talking about Brexit and post-Brexit, and particularly the situation of recruiting and employing post-Brexit, which I think is as I said in some of my emails, not the most scintillating of conversations, but at the same time, an important point to know about and to be aware of, as you'll see as we go through. I will try and keep it as interesting as possible. So what I'll do is, as normal, as we usually do in these webinars, I'll talk you through the material and then I'll take questions in the chat at the end, if that's all right. If you've got any burning questions, obviously, if you can just save them right to the end, that'd be amazing. My caveat on that today is that this is a pretty complicated subject, in all honesty. So what I know is what I've shared with you in the slides. If you have questions that aren't based on what I've got in the slides, I may know the answer, but I may not. That's my way of saying I might not have the answer for you. But I will certainly go away and find an answer if it's not something I would have at my fingertips, if you like. Okay, folks, let's get going. So recruiting and employment post-Brexit, as we've said, what we're going to cover then, let me just actually make that. Yes, here we go. Brilliant. So what we're going to cover, we're going to talk about current EEA employees, and I'll explain what I mean by EEA in just a sec. So we're going to talk about current employees, what you need to know, what you need to do. And then the second part will be looking at employing non-UK nationals in the future, what's changing, what you need to know and what you need to do. So all very exciting stuff. So what next? Basically, Brexit's happened. What next? So let's talk about your current employees first then. So your current employees who are EEA citizens who've been in the UK before the 31st of December, they have to make an application to what's called the EU settlement scheme. And they have a deadline of the 30th of June this year to put that application in. Okay. What is the EEA anyway? So it's the European Economic Area is what it stands for. And essentially it includes all of the EU countries and also includes Iceland, Liechtenstein and Norway. And I knew when that was coming up, I was going to struggle with the pronunciation of it. So if I've got that wrong, then you can have a little laugh about it and I'll go and learn how to pronounce it properly. So coming back to that then, so when people apply for the EU settlement scheme, what are they going to get? I think it's important that you know this so you're able to support your current employees through this process, especially if they come to you and ask questions, then you've got an overview at least. So the rights and status of EU, EEA and Swiss citizens living in the UK by the 31st of December will remain the same until the 30th of June. If they successfully apply to that settlement scheme, then they'll be able to continue living and working in the UK after the 30th of June. So they'll either be given what's called settled status or pre-settled status, and I'll talk you through what that means. But really the differentiation is which status they get depends on how long they've been in the UK by the time they apply. It's quite straightforward. The rights are different depending on the status they get and when they started living in the UK, as we've just said. So this is quite a lot of detail here, but it's again useful to know. So people will potentially be able to get settled status if they've been in the UK for a continuous 5-year period. So that's called continuous residence. And that means 5 years in a row they've been in the UK, Channel Islands or the Isle of Man for at least 6 months in any 12-month period. And then I've listed some exceptions there, which are a period of up to 12 months for an important reason: childbirth, serious illness, study, vocational training, or overseas work posting. Any compulsory military service, because as we know, lots of countries still have compulsory military service. Any time spent abroad as a crime servant or as the family of a crime servant, family member of a crime servant, and time spent abroad in the armed forces or as a family member of someone in the armed forces. They might be considered to be resident in the UK on the 31st of December and may be eligible for settled status if they have lived in the UK for a continuous 5-year period in the past and haven't left the UK for more than 5 years in a row since then. So again, there's some little bit of flexibility there. They can stay in the UK as long as they like if they get settled status. They'll also be able to apply for British citizenship if they're eligible to do so. Let's talk about pre-settled status then. So less than 5 years continuous residence, must have started living in the UK by the 31st of December 2020, as we've said, unless they're applying as the existing close family member of an EU, EEA or Swiss citizen who started living here by then. They can stay in the UK for a further 5 years from the date that they get the pre-settled status, and they can then apply to change that to settled status once they have the 5 years continuous residence, and they have to do that before that pre-settled status expires. It's important to also to note that if people are maybe sort of 4.5 years residents, if they reach the 5 years continuous residence at some point by the 30th of June, then they can simply wait to apply until that 5-year mark has been reached, rather than applying for pre-settled and then having to change to settled. They can just go straight essentially to settled. And then moving on from that, then just to look briefly at what their rights are. Someone will be able to work in the UK, use the NHS for free, enroll in education or study, access public funds like benefits, pensions, and travel in and out of the UK once they have that settled or pre-settled status. Okay. Exceptions, again, useful to know that people don't need to apply if they have indefinite leave to enter the UK, if they have indefinite leave to remain in the UK, and if they have Irish citizenship. That includes British and Irish dual citizenship. So those are the exceptions. They don't have to go through that EU settlement scheme application process if any of those apply. So this is the important bit then, really. What do you have to do? What do you need to do as an employer? So first of all, I would say it's really important that there's no legal obligation for you to communicate anything about the EU settlement scheme, but you might wish to direct your employees to the information that government's providing. Clearly, lots of people will be very valuable members of your team, and you will not want their immigration status to have an impact on their continued ability to work in the UK. So I would say that for many of us, there will be a really good drive and a really good reason to be pointing people in the right direction and sharing information and being open about the EU settlement scheme and what that means to them. But just to be clear on that, though, it is their own responsibility to make an application. There's no requirement for them to tell you as their employer that they have applied, or indeed the outcome of their application. And likewise, and this is from government advice, you should not check that employee has applied. So you shouldn't be asking people if they have applied or not. Okay. You do have a duty not to discriminate against, sorry, put my teeth in. You do have a duty not to discriminate against EU citizens in light of the UK's decision to leave the EU, both as a prospective and a current employer. And you can't make an offer of employment or continued employment which is dependent upon the individual having made an application. Important to know as well. I would also say, this is a caveat from me, and again, I'll come back to the point that I made at the beginning, that this is complicated stuff or potentially complicated stuff. I would advise you not to try and interpret the information provided by the government, and definitely not to be given any kind of immigration advice unless, of course, you're qualified to do so. But certainly you can signpoint in the right direction. I wanted just to touch a little bit on right to work checks. So job applicants currently can prove their right to work using any of the following. That's valid passport or national ID card until the 30th of June, as we've said, if they're an EU, EEA or Swiss citizen. And they can also use a valid biometric residence card until the 30th of June if they're non-EU, EEA or Swiss citizen family member. Okay. Then thereafter, they will be able to prove their right to work with a digital status under the settlement scheme using the Home Office's online view and Prove Your Immigration Status service. They'll be able to generate a share code, share that with you as a prospective employer, and then you can check it. Okay. So just to be clear on that and be absolutely clear, there's no change to any right to work checks until after the 30th of June, and you won't be required to undertake any retrospective checks on your existing EU employees. That's really important to know. Just on sort of verifying and checking proof of the right to work, I thought this is a useful just reminder for everybody really. You should be obtaining original versions of one or more of their acceptable documents. You should be checking the validity of the document in the presence of the person who's given it to you. And you should make a copy, make and retain a clear copy and record the date that the check was made. That's the actual technical process that you should go through in order to correctly check and verify proof of the right to work in the UK. I can have visions of everyone sort of frantically going to filing cabinets and the like to check if they've actually dated when the checks were made and go through it. But that's officially the process that you should go through. And I think, again, this is a useful sign point place to visit. The EU settlement scheme, they have an entire employer toolkit, which gives you all the materials and information that you might need to support your EU employees. And I'll obviously send this information out afterwards, so you've got that link. So that's all talking about current employees and what you need to do and how you can support them, and effectively also what you should and shouldn't do. Really, you know, there isn't an onus on you to really encourage or push people to apply for settled status. It is their own responsibility to do that, so it's not on you to tell them or not tell them. But equally, as I've said, when you've got valuable members of your team, you may want to at least signpost them in the right direction and let them get the right information. So let's talk about how we go about recruiting post-Brexit then. And really, I wanted to be super clear on this because I think it's an important point to make. This whole next section, really, I've focused on recruiting people who are not UK nationals and are not currently residents in the UK. So, or weren't residents by the 30th of December, which was that 31st of December, which was that cut-off point. If they are resident, then even if you're recruiting them after the 30th of June, you need to carry out that ID and proof of the right to work check before they start work. So what we were just talking about with the biometric, the online status of the EU settlement scheme, that whole piece there. So that's if they're already resident in the UK. What we're now going to be talking about is people who are not currently resident in the UK. So let's just say you advertise a job, somebody in Spain applies, you really like them, you want them to come over for the job. This is the bit that is really, really important to you. So fundamental change then, I wanted to really just flag this and highlight this. EU and non-EU citizens, except Irish citizens, who wish to come to and live in the UK from the 1st of January will need to demonstrate the right to be in the UK. And this is just effectively like non-EU citizens do currently. Okay. So what you have to do as an employer then, you will be required to become a sponsor in order to bring somebody into the UK and have them work for you. So that requires you to gain what's called a sponsorship license. Luckily, in some ways, the sponsorship process has been streamlined and simplified, but it's still complicated. So heaven only knows what you could say about it previously then. And there is no limit on the number of skilled workers who can come to the UK, and we'll talk about that skilled worker status in a sec. But it's really important to know that actually there is this important step that you need to take as an employer if you wish to bring somebody over to the UK who's not a UK national to work. Okay. So let's just go over what the points-based immigration system now looks like. So anybody coming to the UK for work needs to demonstrate that they meet a specific set of requirements for which they will score points. Skilled workers, which is the kind of category that we're talking about, skilled worker visa, they need 70 points or more. 50 points are what they call non-tradable, which means they're mandatory, and the remaining are effectively tradable, and we'll go through that in just a sec. So how will people be able to work? This is a really important thing. They will have to apply for and be granted what's called a skilled worker visa. 3 criteria are required in order to achieve the 50 mandatory points. They must have an offer of a job from a licensed sponsor. So that's important. They cannot come to the UK if they don't have that offer. And if you as the prospective employer don't have a sponsorship license. The job itself must be at or above a minimum skill level. And the applicant must be able to speak English to an acceptable standard. Okay. and they must also pass relevant UK criminality checks before they're able to come to work in the UK. So let's just run through very quickly what those 70 points look like. As we said, the offer of the job by the approved sponsor is mandatory, worth 20 points. The job at the appropriate skill level again, mandatory 20 points. Speaks English, mandatory 10. And then the remainder there, talk about a bit around the salary brackets, with the shortage occupations and education qualifications. So we'll look at some of those in a bit more detail. So there are a small number of ways that people can earn those additional 20 tradable points. If they're paid the higher of the general salary threshold of 25,600 gross per year, or the going rate for their particular job. If the applicant is paid less than 25,600 a year or the going rate, they have a job offer in a specific shortage occupation or an academic PhD qualification relevant to the job. And there is a complicated system regarding going rates. The UK points-based immigration system will give you more information, but there's a bit of a complicated system about going rates for jobs. So it's not what you think is the going rate, it's what the immigration system think that is a going rate for a particular role. So moving on then, let's look at what you actually need to do in order to get the sponsorship license. And bear in mind again that this is the first step on a journey. It isn't the one and only thing that you're going to have to do here. So there are a number of hoops to go through, being honest. So you will have to apply for a sponsorship license. You have to demonstrate that you are a genuine and solvent business, and there are a number of ways and numbers of pieces of information and proof that you need to provide in order to demonstrate that. You need to show that the roles you want to recruit into are credible and can meet the salary and skill requirements. Senior personnel and key users of the service, the sponsorship service, if you like, need to undergo criminality and security checks. You need to pay a fee and an immigration skills charge where required, and you need to meet your sponsor responsibilities on an ongoing basis. So the fees, just to touch on that, depend on the size of the company, currently range from 536 to 1,476, and that's for your license in effect, as we've said, and there are discounted rates for charities and SMEs. If you're successful in getting a sponsorship license, and as I've said, it's not the easiest of processes. There are a number of things, boxes you've got to tick, number of pieces of information you've got to provide, level of detail, etc. So if you get that sponsorship license, you must then issue a certificate of sponsorship to each individual person that you want to bring into the UK. This confirms their personal details, gives information about the role that you're offering, etc. But the most important thing I will say here, and it's really, really essential that you understand, is it doesn't guarantee that they will definitely get a visa to work in the UK. So you could go through the sponsorship license process, you could do everything correctly at your end, but let's just say for argument's sake, they don't pass the criminality check, who knows, then they will not be allowed to enter the UK. So it's not a guarantee that they'll be able to come and work for you. It's a step in the process, not a guarantee. So how long does it take? So it can actually take up to 8 weeks to get a sponsorship license, but you can conveniently pay an additional fee to get your application fast-tracked. So it's worth bearing in mind that it can take up to an 8-week period, and it's definitely worth factoring that into your recruitment processes as you move forward, particularly if you are potentially likely to, or if you know that you're likely to recruit somebody who's not a UK national currently and isn't resident in the UK. I touched on something called sponsor responsibilities, and again, I just wanted to outline those as well for you. So you have a responsibility, and you must check that your foreign workers have the necessary skills, qualifications, or professional accreditations to do the jobs, and you have to keep copies of documents that show this. So that's really important. You've got to double check and make sure that you've kept copies of that. You can only assign certificates of sponsorship to workers when the job is suitable for sponsorship. So if your job doesn't meet the criteria for sponsorship, then you will not be able to recruit somebody who's not a UK national and not resident in the UK. And you absolutely must tell UK Visas and Immigration if your sponsored workers are not complying with the conditions of their visa. So you have a responsibility there to report your workers in the event that they're not complying, which is a really important one to note as well. And what they've said is that your license can be downgraded, suspended, or even withdrawn if you don't meet those responsibilities. So you need to be prepared that that's what's going to be asked of you for the future. And monitoring as well. I think monitoring is a really key point here, and it's one of the things that the government do specifically ask of any sponsor. You need to have HR systems in place that allow you to monitor their immigration status, Keep copies of relevant documents for each employee, including their passport and the right to work information. Track and record their attendance and keep their contact details up to date. And as we've said before and touched on, you have to report to the UKVI if there is a problem. For example, if your employee stops coming to work, because again, the working is part of their condition of their right to be in the UK. If they stop working, then have they still got the right to be in the UK? Really important that you're able to monitor and have those HR systems in place to allow you to do that comfortably and easily. In effect, it's not going to cost you a lot of extra work and hassle to do that. Okay. So I love this picture of monitor, and I show it every time I get, because I think it's the extreme, excuse me, but it's still a good one to look at. Okay. I would just say, excuse me, my advice really with regards to the HR system side of things is that now would be a really good time, if you haven't already, to consider a cloud-based system. Personnel files have definitely gone high tech these days. They're very easy to use. You can have employee level access to their own details, and therefore there's like a self-service element to it that they can update their own information, which is very useful. There's customizable reporting often, so you can run different reports depending on your business needs. You can have attendance and holiday recording and monitoring. Again, coming back to what we said about being able to monitor your foreign employees, that's extremely important. And you can set reminders and tasks, things like probationary periods, reviews that are due, anniversaries that might be coming up. All of the above can all be done easily and simply within a cloud-based system. If you need a recommendation, then by all means, please ask me. There's several that I would recommend, particularly, well, for small businesses, but a lot of them are scalable as well to bigger businesses. Okie dokes. Also, then, just to touch on the fact that you would need to report to the UK Visas and Immigration any significant changes to your business that impact on significant changes in your own circumstances that impact on the business. So you have to tell them if you stop trading or if you become insolvent. Remember, we came back to you have to be a genuine solvent business. Well, if you become insolvent or stop trading, then obviously that criteria no longer applies. If you substantially change the nature of your business, then UKVI need to be informed. And if you are involved in a merger or a takeover, again, you need to be telling them about that. And you must also tell them if you're changing your details, like your address or allocated roles. Now, allocated roles refers to the online system that they want you to that you use in order to allocate, monitor, and manage your certificates of sponsorship, and you are able to nominate different people at different access levels to have access to that system. That's what we mean by allocated roles. And to register that change of circumstances, you would use the system I've just been referring to, which is called the Sponsorship Management System, so the SMS. Okay, so more information. There is so much more information on the gov.uk website, all about sponsorship for employers. That is my warning, my caveat there. If you're looking for a scintillating read, this probably isn't it. I've been through it on a number of occasions, and believe me, it's not the most exciting. But as we've established before, you know, none of this should really be a barrier to you. If you want to bring somebody into the UK to work, then it can be well worth going through this process, because obviously the trade-off is that you get their particular skill set or experience or abilities that you perhaps can't get from somebody who's already in the UK, or you've tried and failed to find somebody in the UK, but actually there's somebody in France or Germany or wherever who've got the exact skill set that you need. Then the trade-off would be more than worth it, I think. But it's really important that you don't go into this with eyes closed thinking that actually this is a pretty straightforward process, because it isn't. Okay, so I just wanted to touch briefly on other options. There is what's called the global talent route. And under this route, people who are highly skilled who can achieve the required level of points, they can enter the UK without a job offer if they are endorsed by a recognised UK body. And it's not a requirement for you as an employer to be a licensed sponsor in order to employ somebody under this route. So the endorsing bodies that they can be approved by, if you like, or recognised by the Royal Society for Science and Medicine, Academy of Engineering, the British Academy, UK Research and Innovation, Tech Nation, and Arts Council England for arts and culture, obviously. There's also a graduate route, which again is worth bearing in mind. So for international students who have completed a degree in the UK from the summer of 2021, they can apply for a graduate visa. And it permits them to stay in the UK and work at any skill level for a period of 2 years after their studies have come to an end. This indeed, again, is an unsponsored route, so it doesn't require you to jump through all of those hoops with regards to sponsorship, as we just talked about. For international students who've completed a PhD in the UK, they'll be able to remain for 3 years after completion of the study. So it's, again, useful, worth bearing in mind. Okay. Thought it'd be interesting just to kind of talk you through very briefly. I've done this quite recently, actually. A client of ours really wanted to recruit a lady who's Canadian, in actual fact. And this is what the client then said. Because they were the best candidate, we recently employed a non-UK national. Prior to the recruitment process, we had no idea of and were in no way prepared for the potentially onerous and difficult process entailed. There was a clock ticking on the candidate's visa, and whilst we had no infrastructure in place with respect to the sponsorship licence and the certificates of sponsorship that we would be required to employ. Keeping HR Simple were absolutely invaluable in terms of the support and advice they provided in order to navigate what can be a frustrating and obscure process. We're very grateful for how easy they made it. And hopefully you'll be able to tell by that the client was successful in their application for a sponsorship license, and they were able to issue the certificate of sponsorship to the lady in question. So we can really help you to understand what you need to do, navigate through that sponsorship license process, make sure that you've provided the necessary information to support your application. And then once all of that's in place, then set up and manage those HR monitoring systems required, and much more, depending on what it is that you might need. So there's lots of help available. So please don't hesitate to let me know if there is something that we can help you with. Okay. So I'm going to just take some questions in just a second. So that's the end of that. So I'm just going to stop sharing. And hopefully, has anyone got any questions? Happy to take any questions that you might want to put in the chat box for me, if there's anything that you want to ask, or anything I haven't covered, or anything I wasn't clear on potentially. That's always a possibility. I do try and keep it as clear as possible, but I recognize that it's not always the case. Can we get a copy of the presentation? Absolutely, Tracy, that's not a problem. I will always send you both a link to the recording once I've downloaded it, and you'll also get a copy of the presentation, so that's not a problem. Claire, you've commented complex. You're not wrong. You are not wrong, and that's why I think it's just so important that people are aware of this in advance, so that they can make decisions in good time and get, particularly with the 8-week potential delay, if you like, from actually applying for a license, sponsorship license, to actually being able to achieve it, is quite a long time for any business, particularly with recruitment and trying to get things moving. So really important that you know about it in advance, really. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's complex. It's not a straightforward process. As if we needed more complexity in our lives after a year of furlough. Okay. So Tracy, you've asked me, can I please go over the global routes option with Arts Council or Tech Council? Right. Okay. So what I'll do then, if that's okay, I'll just go back to sharing the screen again. So just bear with me a second, and I'll pull that slide up because that will be important. Thank you for your question, Tracy. That's really good, and I can go back over that. So the global talent route is what I was talking about. Maybe was I not? Haha, here we go. So so if you've got somebody who's a highly skilled individual who can achieve the required level of points, they can come to the UK without a specific job offer if they are endorsed by a recognised UK body as approved by the Home Office, and we'll go back and look at that list. So you as an employer, you do not have to be a licensed sponsor in order to employ somebody who's coming under this route, but they have got to have been endorsed by the following bodies in order to be able to remain and work in the UK. That's the fundamental bit. They've got to have an endorsement in order to be able to remain and work in the UK. So for anyone in science and medicine, it'll be the Royal Society. For anyone in engineering, it will be the Royal Academy of Engineering. For humanities will be the British Academy. For science and research, it will be UK Research and Innovation. For digital technology, it will be Tech Nation, and for arts and culture, it will be Arts Culture England. So hopefully that's a bit clearer. Apologies if I didn't make it very clear in the first instance, but in essence, this is an alternative to you having to sponsor somebody to come to the UK. They can, in effect, tick the box, if you like, by being able to come in by one of these endorsements by one of these official bodies. Okay, I'll stop sharing again for a sec. Oh, you're welcome. Hopefully that made more sense. And yeah, you, as we said, we'll get a copy of the presentation and the slides to you on an email very shortly. So you'll have a bit more chance to have a look through it. I would imagine, and again, if you look through that web link that I shared with you, which was where to find more information for sponsorship for employers, you'll probably find more information about this global talent route and indeed the endorsement that's required. I would imagine that it's the individual themselves who've got to apply to the approved bodies to be endorsed, but it's, you know, there'll be some additional detail out there, I'm sure. We can always have a look for you if necessary. Any other comments, questions, queries? Are you all in stunned silence as to how complicated this is and how much you definitely don't want to recruit non-UK nationals in the future? I think it's interesting. I've been obviously preparing the information and going through that process with the client recently with a Canadian lady. It does worry me that this will actually be off-putting to employers, and that rather than, you know, sort of open up your job opportunities to people who are not based in the UK, that some people may decide not to do that. And I think that's a real shame for you know, for where we are as a country. But hey, I'm not going to get political because that's not what today's about. So just give it a couple more minutes. Anybody got any more questions or queries or comments at all? Anything anybody else wants to share? Doesn't look like it. Oh, here we go. Can the employer check an individual before trying to sponsor? Steve, I'm not quite sure what you mean. Bear with me a second. Steve, if I unmute you, are you okay? Are you okay to ask in a bit more detail what it is that you need? Does that work for you? Okay, there you go. I've unmuted you, Steve. That's a very fetching looking profile picture. Weren't expecting that. Do tell me, so if can an employer check an individual before trying to sponsor? So explain to me a bit more what you mean, please.
Well, you went through what an employer has to do and said that there are no guarantees that there's going to be success. So the employer could do everything they need to do, fill all the forms in correctly, and yet the individual fail for whatever reason. I mean, I know you mentioned that there might be a criminal element to why they fail, but and you could then argue, well, would you want to employ that individual anyway? But
yeah.
it seems, do you kind of have to invest that level of effort and money without having some confidence that the person is going to meet some basic level of criteria before you attempt?
Yeah, and you've nailed it absolutely in what you've just said, that you would have to go through effectively, I'm calling it jumping through hoops, but you do have to go through a process and fork out some money, which is non-refundable, of course, to actually get that certificate to get that license in the first place. What I would say is, of course, I wouldn't typically encourage people to do this unless they had a candidate in mind. So there is an element of obviously the normal recruitment process that you would still typically go through, the interviews, maybe travel permitting, etc. You might have some face-to-face conversations, etc. But you would certainly have had an opportunity to check that their English is to the required level, for example, so they should be able to tick that box. The other criteria, if you remember, were that they were able to speak English, that the job was at the required level, and that that you were a licensed sponsor. So the licensed sponsor bit you can take care of yourself by going through that process. The job being at the appropriate level, again, that would be something that you would need to double check before you went, but again, before you initiated or started the process, that you were actually operating at the right skill level in the first place. And whether or not they've got the appropriate level of English and indeed qualifications to do the role, again, I would suggest that would typically be part of your recruitment process anyway. So you would normally be talking to somebody identifying if they've got enough level of English in order to be able to carry out the job role, for example. So whilst it's not a guarantee, there is still a lot that you can do to make sure that the candidate you're wanting to make that job offer to is going to tick all of the boxes to be able to come to the UK and remain in the UK. The only thing that you've got no control over, as we said before, is the criminality check element of it. Does that make more sense? Does that help?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
okay.
Thank you.
Great, you're welcome. I'm gonna mute you again if that's all right.
Yeah.
Oh, if only it were that easy in real life. I'm going to get in trouble for that, aren't I? I can guarantee it. Brilliant. Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate the question on that. So does anyone else want to ask anything just before we wrap up? I'm not sure. I think I've been inviting questions probably for long enough, really. Okay, dokes. So thank you, as always, for coming along, for attending, for being here, for listening, and for taking on board everything that I've been talking around. I will be sending out the email with the PDF of the slide deck, and you will get a copy of all the recording as well. What I would say is, by all means, you know, I'm here. I'm happy to answer any questions. I've very, very recently been through the process of working with a client and going through that sponsorship license process. So I've got very recent experience of doing that. More than happy to help if that becomes relevant for any of you. And indeed, if you've got any other questions or anything else you want to put to me, you're all the lucky recipients of my regular email updates, I think. And if you're not, let me know and I'll make sure you get added to the list. So you know, obviously, I keep in touch with you on a regular basis and keep you up to date with what's happening. So again, thank you so much for attending. I really do appreciate it. Information to follow, but if there are any questions or anything at all in the meantime, you know where I am. Thanks very much and have a good day. Cheers then. Bye.